And we are live. Welcome to the Lunatic Libertarian. I'm here with the Libertarian Party candidate for Wisconsin, Secretary of State Neil Harmon. How you doing tonight, Neil?
I'm doing great, Justin. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on my podcast. The little known lunatic is here to spread liberty and freedom for everybody. I look forward to our Wisconsin convention. It will be my first, and that's coming up this Friday, right?
Yep, I'm very excited about it. It'll actually be my second, so I'm very excited about coming and meeting all the new people that are part of the party. So that'll be nice.
Uh, why don't you tell the people where you originated from and what got you into the liberty movement and what got you interested in running for such a position in office?
Well, I have been in. I dabbed in politics probably all my life. I lived in southeastern Wisconsin a majority of my life. My parents were Union Democrats, so I dabbed in the Democrat Party when I first got out of high school 20 some years ago. Then slowly but surely I got into a spat with the Democrat Party because there's a lot of things they say but they don't do, and they say that for the little people but they're not, and it's just a big money funnel. So I
Exactly.
decided to switch to the Republican Party probably in 2010 roughly, and just by 2016 I had enough. I was like, these big parties have no idea what's going on in real people's lives. It's just a big filtering mess. This duopoly needs to break up. I got into the Libertarian Party in 2016. I listened to a speech from Gary Johnson, I believe it was on CPAP, um, and I got very interested because I felt like I was politically homeless. So I was looking around and I was like, oh, Gary's pretty close to my ideals. I know he's a former Republican and he worked in a Democrat state. And from there, I got in touch with the state party's chair, and then I got hooked in, and I've been with the party since 2016. So this is now 6 years. Yep, and now I'm vice chair of the state party. Just recently last year. So this is my first full year will be completed soon. I got another year to go, and then every 2 years we decide on our XCOM, as they call it, our executive board. So,
Okay. Do you
uh,
think that running for Secretary of State right now is beneficial for the Libertarian Party in more ways than just winning the seat?
yeah, I mean, there's several reasons why. I mean, we need to express what we are for. I think a lot of people don't understand what libertarian is. They look at the first part, they see liberal, and then you got to explain to them, no, that's not what it is. It's liberty, not liberal. It's liberty. And then a lot of people also think that we're like fringe Republicans too, and that's not the truth either, because a lot of social issues we are very open to a lot of the social issues that are out there. One, we don't believe that government should be involved in social issues first and foremost, and secondly, we believe that people should be able to run their own lives how they want to run it without government interference. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And with me running for Secretary of State, I think that's my big thing, is to try and get the message out of what libertarian is, what liberty is, and how we see fit, how we're presenting it, so we don't have to waste time explaining it to people. And when you do explain it to people, they're like, oh yeah, I am libertarian.
Yeah, I found out a few people that I didn't know were libertarian because they talked a lot about Trump in the past couple of years, and come to find out, ask them, hey, check out my podcast. I just got some business cards that were designed by KelseyLineDesigns.com. A little plug for her. She did a great job for me, and I hand them out, and they're like, yeah, I voted for Spike and Joe in 2020, and I'm
2020.
like, really? Like, yeah, they were like, yeah, we voted it, but you know, um, that's we're hoping that we can see a lot more, and I think that spreading the message around is the best thing that we can do, and having candidates that are more than qualified to run those positions versus what we've had for so many years. It's really time for the change to start taking over.
Yeah, we had a big opportunity in 2016. I thought that we were really going to start pushing the party, but I mean, we had a little bit of a setback, and now it looks like we're back on track as far as getting some local politicians elected. And it always starts with the local level, actually. And the, it's best to know what you're doing inside your own community. Being on the school board or county supervisor, those types of things are important. I think sometimes we think too big, and that we kind of get lost in the shuffle, and that's the reason why we don't have the successes that we need to have for us to live our normal lives without the government interfering in what we want to do in our lives.
Did you see the post by David Hogue about starting his own business and how all the red tape is in his way and it's so expensive and the government should do all this other stuff? I thought he wanted all these government regulations, but now he's finally starting to figure out when it's actually imposed on you, it's not really what you want.
Well, exactly. And they're so clueless as far as those types of things. They think it's all good and mighty and it's good for the good of the people. And then, like a celebrity or something tries to get into some sort of business. They're like, oh my God, I have to fork over this much money before I can even start thinking about doing anything. I mean, it's so funny how it comes full circle. And then when they look at it, they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is not a good idea. Well, maybe you should have said something or looked into it first before you spouted your mouth off on something that you had no idea what you were talking about.
Exactly, exactly. Most small businesses or young entrepreneurs will tell you that trying to open a business will turn you libertarian more than anything else, is because you're trying to live the American dream and have your own ability to create an income and be a producer for your community. And then the government steps right in there right away and says, no, 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 me first, me first, me first.
And that's the biggest problem. I mean, what we've seen with how COVID was handled, I really think it was a job of what the government did was they shut down a lot of small businesses so corporations would have more power, and it was completely unfair. And they should have let these small businesses adapt to what the COVID situation was. And unfortunately, our government, with Trump in office, failed the small business people. And I really think that now the percentage of small businesses to corporations is greatly reduced because of this. And it's unfortunate because America was built on small businesses.
Absolutely.
That is the big key to this situation and getting it back under control is having the small businesses um, get the light again. And unfortunately, nobody wants to invest because they never know when the government's going to shut them down again.
Right. What do you think about Wisconsin having no real national news when the health department's mass decree was declared unconstitutional in the state?
Well, they're going to always hide things that are not in their propaganda. So I'm not shocked that it wasn't national. I mean, we know the narrative's pushed by what the national media does, and unfortunately, our national media has been in the pockets of politicians for quite some time, and the narrative will always be theirs until I mean, I think it's better now. We're getting better now because there are so many outlets now. The unfortunate thing is the government's trying to interfere in all these outlets and saying, no, you can't let them post this, post that, post this. Well, you know what? A lot of truth is behind what's coming out on this stuff, including, what these vaccinations, as far as the health risk for children and things like that. You're starting to see it, and Pfizer and Moderna get free passes because our government said, "Oh, what? You can't sue them."
Well, and they also provided all the funds through taxpayer money to pay for the vaccinations, even though you were a taxpayer that didn't want it. So they made the decision for you. And I think that one of the problems that we're having across our communities is that people are making less and less decisions for themselves because they're becoming complacent that the government, oh, well, I have this overabundance. What do I don't have to worry about the government after me. Well, I mean, if you get laid into the system that much to where you're just giving away your personal liberties and your decision making to the government. I mean, you're really empowering them to do anything they want. Like, say, you have to wear a mask, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. One of the reasons that I still live in Wisconsin is that you still have vaccination exemption status according to our legislature, so that you can still send your kids to public school. You can still do everything like a quote unquote normal human being would, but you're not forced by law to do anything else. You know, you're not forced by law to say, well, you have to run through the entire schedule of vaccinations for your children to get a public education. But now we also see that public education, because it's ran by government, is not what it's supposed to be either. And I think we're in a real decline as far as skill sets that are needed by our youth. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I always thought that to graduate high school, you need to have a finance class and a civics class. I think those are two important things that bring the attention to you as far as an adult understanding how our country works. You balance a checkbook. I know our government doesn't, but you balance a checkbook, and you know and understand how our government is supposed to function. So those are two important things. I think, though, with public education, that I think you're starting to see finally parents starting to rise up and be on the school boards and try to reverse a lot of the bad harm that has been done, because I think parents ignored a lot of it for some time, and now that they're seeing the problems that are coming out, like their children are falling behind on things because they were virtual learning when they should have been in the schools. I was I was actually at a rally in Madison where the teachers were having a fit that they would have to be in the classrooms, and I see all these signs and things that they're putting on there, like they're worried about their health. I mean, I understand that aspect of it, but also your chance of death with COVID was extremely low as it was. I mean, you get to see these kids all the time, and you're getting probably the flu 3-4 times a year, and you're doing okay after that too. I mean, there's precautions that were in place. There was really no need to have virtual learning. Some kids thrive in virtual learning, and that's fine. You can have virtual learning set up as a hybrid. I'm perfectly fine with that. I think that you have to adapt to the model of success for your kids. So I had no problem with virtual learning. I did have a problem that I didn't have a choice. And my kids did fall behind a little bit with virtual learning in place. And I really thought that the public schools failed us. And the community that I'm in currently, we were actually the first one in Milwaukee County to finally get rid of the mask mandate. But that was only because, or for the schools, that was only because the parents finally rose up and said, hey, we had enough of this, and you guys need to change the policy. And then it passed 7-2, and then one of the people that was part of the school board that voted to keep the masks just got voted out in April. So that was fantastic.
Well, I think people are starting to realize what their government's actually doing because they have nothing else better to do because they're sitting at home. I mean, there's a lot of people that in Wisconsin that do work all the time, but there's a lot of people that took advantage of the unemployment and I would call it the handouts of COVID. I think Tony Evers made a huge mistake by taking any federal money for COVID because there's actually there's attachments to those funds, and you have to comply with those attachments to not. I don't know what happens as far as government suing government for funds that were taken, but then I don't know how that works, and then I can't speak on that. But when we look at what they're doing as far as giving all this federal aid and saying, well, if you take the aid, well, now we got you by the cojones, or we got you by the balls. So now you're going to have to do what we tell you to do, and you're going to have to implement what we tell you to implement. And that's not what the federal government was ever supposed to be. Do you think that if libertarians can slowly start transitioning into these smaller offices, that the state government and the federal government's going to be looking at somebody that's going to be like, nah, you guys can go take a hike. We're good over here. And Wisconsin has one of the better federal funding to state funding ratios, I believe.
Yeah, I think that there are some of the major parties already are looking at libertarians and saying, "Oh, we got to turn more libertarian because these guys are starting to, pick up some steam." And they're realizing that, oh yeah, our message is starting to um, resonate with people. So I am seeing from at least one party a lot of infighting amongst their party because they're like, oh, we should be leaning towards more of a libertarian edge instead of a big government edge. Um, as far as libertarians being in smaller places, yes. I mean, I think if you resonate from the bottom and you start screaming to the top will start having to listen because those are the people that are going to be next in line to take those positions from the top people, especially if they're succeeding and doing a great job. I think they're always looking over their shoulder, and that's why they're always looking at getting their next reelection too. Because I mean, they'll be a year in and they'll already be starting a reelection campaign. But yeah, I totally agree. I think that if libertarians start taking a lot more of these local government spots, and then you start seeing success within these communities, you're going to see changes slowly. And that's the key, is it's going to be slow because for 200 and some years, we've been chipping away the other way. I don't want it to be 200 years before we get it more to what it used to be. I think that you have to be realistic, though. You're not going to be able to change it overnight. And if
Yeah.
we can nibble away at it in 20, 30 years and make it better for my children and my children's children, I'm all for it. I'll suffer. I don't care. As long as my children and my children's children have the freedoms that were allotted to us back in the 1700s that have been just completely chipped away. And that goes back to too, the states are supposed to have the power, not the federal government. And somehow it got switched and record time too. It started in the 40s and it just streamlined from there.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the implementation of the Federal Reserve and the central banking system, I think you can pretty much start there. And then we had the Roaring Twenties, and then we had the Great Depression, and then we had World War II. And I think it's a pretty easy timeline to follow. One of the things that I want to remind people in Wisconsin is the Wisconsin Constitution, Article 1. And it says that Section 1, as amended November 1982 and April 1986, all people are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And that is our first article. First, it's number one. You are free to be an individual, and that our government is here to just protect your inherent rights. That is it. And they're not here to tell you where you're supposed to go to school, how you're supposed to educate your children, what foods to eat, how much exercise you're supposed to have. None of that. They are only there to protect your inherent rights to be free. That is it. I
And
just want to remind people of that.
that's 100% libertarian right there. Must be a libertarian that wrote it.
And
Yeah,
I think people have lost that. They've lost that freedom because they think, oh, the government's so big, I can't fight big gov. Because we've seen people get beat down over the decades where government has come in and forced themselves upon individuals that are just trying to be producers and make a living. And they shut them down because it's not good for big gov.
and we have institutions in place that kind of suck the brain juice out of people that not let them think for themselves. That's the other thing. You have these colleges, you have other institutions that people are relying on, and they won't get themselves out of the constant circle of, just put it as welfare as an example. People cheat themselves to try to get welfare dollars, though they could possibly get a job, work up through that job, and get themselves out of poverty and have a fulfilling life. But because their parents did it, their grandparents did it, that's the only way they know how to work the system. And then the schools, they basically think for you now, especially in colleges. I'm not going to speak on grade schools or high schools. I think a lot of it is starting to trickle down there. I don't think it's as prevalent as it is in the universities and colleges. In like I said, the brain drain, basically, that they make them think for them. And if you have an opposite opinion, you're wrong. Well, that's not the way this country is built on debate too. And you have
Correct.
to have both sides. If you don't have a second side, it's not a debate anymore. You're basically being told what is right and what is wrong, and that's not how the system works, how it's supposed to work anyway.
Well, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my high school was actually a very small vocational school or partnership school. I forget what they actually call them. I think it was a partnership school. Our graduating class only had 13 people. Now, and these are troubled youth. So you have to meet a certain criteria to be able to qualify to get into that smaller classroom environment, and only have there's 2 teachers per classroom and 20 kids per class. So that's a very manageable system. When you talk about educating people that are pretty wild, let's just say it as it is, people are wild. So um that's where I actually learned my multiplications and stuff like that, because I wasn't learning that in Milwaukee public schools. I learned how to fist fight pretty good in Milwaukee public schools. That's about it. And So going to that, and then finding the opportunity that you could ride both sides of the fence, you could actually get an education and then not lose anything as far as what you were doing outside of school. So I mean, for me that was great, because then I joined the military after I graduate, and so on and so forth. It's been a rough ride, I would say, but everybody's life is rough. I don't think anybody has a real easy ride when you're talking about it. I think that government being involved with education or licensing or any of these regulations or anything, all they're doing is barricading the public. And then you have everybody promising, "Oh, there's going to be change. There's going to be change." I don't even try and go down to Milwaukee anymore, because it is literally just not something I want to see anymore. I've moved out into the country, and I'm like, yeah, I'd rather look at green pastures and no trash on the ground than drive down Center Street or Fond du Lac or any of those, north side, south side, west side, east side, any of those neighborhoods, and just look at nothing but filth, and people don't care. And I mean, when you surround yourself with that, you're going to have a negative attitude. But I mean, when you surround yourself with people that want to do something with themselves and not complain about everything, I mean, it gives you a completely different perspective on life.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing too. I think you have to be for something and not always against something. I think it's been a big problem with politics that has made such a great divide now, is we're always against something. Well, the thing is when you're against something, you're not putting your full effort into it. When you're for something, you're going to put more effort into it because you have a passion for it. And I see that as a big key, is that people don't realize that, this anger towards one another because you have a different philosophy than somebody else. Like for me, I never force my philosophy on anybody. Never ever will I. Never ever. Um, I will never do that. What I do is I will engage in conversation, whether I agree with you or not. I will still listen to your opinion, and then you can listen to my opinion, and they can decide after walking away from me whether I was right or I was wrong, and they'll still go on with their life happy and happy go lucky. And for me, I think that is the big key, is just to have the conversations. And I think some people just take it the wrong way sometimes when they have a conversation with somebody, and then there's one thing that ticks them off right away, and then they don't listen to you the whole time. I mean, it could be as simple as something like abortion. Well, abortion is it's a 50-50 issue in this country. I understand that. But you also have the right to choose either path that you want, or a happy medium. I understand that. But I'm not going to go off on you because, you're pro-life or you're pro-choice. I think that if you have a passion for that, that's fine. But you cannot be, yeah, that's the other big thing, is you cannot be a one social issue voter.
Right.
Because if you are a one social issue voter, you're going to get involved in a trap with one of the big two, And you may not agree with 60, 70% of what that party stands for, but because you're that one issue voter, you've fallen into a trap, and you're stuck there for life with them because you're not wise to it. And I never understood that. I never understood why people would be Democrats if they're pro-choice, and that's all they run on. And it's like, well, do you see all the other things that Democrats stand for? No, it's abortion. It's abortion. That's all that matters. Well, there's other parties that are pro-choice too that you could look into, and that would probably be more in line with what you're looking for. And I'm not saying that it's libertarian or Green Party, whatever, but I'm just saying that that people need to look more into what their passion truly is. If they only like one social issue or one issue, that is not the way to go around voting for people just because of one issue.
Well, and I don't think that people vote necessarily on maybe their issues anyway. I think they vote on what they're told that politicians will do for them. I think that's one of the biggest things is that, oh, well, they said they're going to do this and they're going to do this and that's going to help out me. Well, I don't know many people that will actually get up to help themselves when they have that mindset. You know, I listen to a lot of David Goggins and Jocko Willink. That's what's got my brain always going, well, you got to do more. You got to get out there. You got to do more. You got to get out there. You got to do more. And I think people get complacent with their situations. And when I was on public assistance, I was not complacent. I hated giving up my financial records every month, resubmitting paperwork every month, doing all this stuff so that I can receive a benefit that I paid in for when I was 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. And I didn't have children until I was in my late 20s. So when I was on public assistance, I had paid into the system for over 10 years, and that was supposedly my insurance for if I fell on hard times. I was only on public assistance a couple of years, and people become complacent and just, oh, well, I don't have to do anything more. This is good enough. But then they still complain that it's not good enough. But then they say that the government should do more. And I know that because I lived that mentality my whole upbringing in Milwaukee. And it's just like, yeah, once I got outside of that though and saw what life was really about and saw parts of the world and how different it is and everything else, I'm like, man, that is not the thought process for me. That is not the group think that I want. I'm done with that. And a lot of people get turned off and they don't want to talk to you anymore because they think you're a lunatic. But I am crazy as shit.
Fitting name.
Right?
No, I agree. I think that people get they're politically naive, I'll just say. I think that's a big thing. They're politically naive because they've been in the same circle all their life and they're not willing to dip their toe outside that circle. And that's why, and most of it's fear. And the government does a great job of instilling fear in people. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest problems with our government is that they derive on fear, and that's how they become bigger and bigger. And I think that, again, with COVID, I think it was a big test. I think it was a government test. How far can we push our citizens until they fight back?
Could be.
I fell into the trap a little bit. I said I was willing to give this a month. I'll shut down for a month and see what happens. And then after the month, I was like, okay, this is a joke. You're putting out numbers that are lies.
Yep.
You're counting deaths of people that have stage 4 cancer.
Yep.
Because they had COVID in their system at the end. I mean, they have influenza at the end too. Do you count those as influenza deaths? I mean, it's all a game, and it's a sad game, and we know it's a game.
Well, another thing that I brought up before, just besides COVID, when you have the government lying to you blatantly, I ask people all the time about weather modification. They're like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory and this and that. But it's kind of funny because there's a law on the Wisconsin books that actually allows you to get a permit for weather modification. I'm going to bring that up right now. It is actually Wisconsin State Statute 93.35, weather modification. And you actually have to apply for a permit to change any atmospheric scenarios in the Wisconsin region. And that's an actual law on our books. and I think it's been implemented since 1974. Don't quote me on that date, but I'm pretty sure it's around that time.
Okay.
But when you ask people, hey, does the government allow people to modify the weather? Oh, you're full of it. I was like, why do I need this statute then? Makes you wonder.
Yeah, because you know what's going on. There wouldn't be a law if it wasn't going on. There wouldn't be. You wouldn't have to get a license if it wasn't going on.
Right. And I just think it's funny that, people take so much trust in the government instead of trust into their fellow human being. And then when you're trying to inform them of information that's actually pertinent to their humanity, their life, everything, they just completely disregard it because I use the word programmed, but I'm sure there's other nicer words that can be used, but that people actually don't understand that this is stuff that can get you locked in jail or anything else. And it's like, no, this is the law, really. This is not something that I made up. This is actually on the books.
Yep. And again, if they wouldn't have a law if they weren't doing it. So, and we know how licensing works in a lot of things, and it's kind of stupid, like braiding hair and those types of things. I mean, come on. Why do you need a license to braid hair? Why do you need a license to cut hair? Why do you need the licensing is becoming a huge problem that people can't be innovative because they're under restrictions by licensing.
Yeah. I mean, but they'll give everybody a driver's license, and you see how people drive, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is the wild wild west down here, and it's 90 miles an hour on the side streets and stuff like that. And I just like, everybody's got a license though, but you won't issue a license for people to procreate or anything like that, but is it coming, or did we reach a point where when you have to have a piece of paper that says you're vaccinated to enter a facility? Do you think that we're entering those realms? And when you start entering those realms and you're going to place a restriction or create a caste system of the vaccinated, the unvaccinated, the academic versus the worker, you start creating all these I call them labels, titles, and categories that separate us as human beings. And then people will really start turning against each other, and then you'll have secular groupthink, and I think that's what we're turning to. Do you think if libertarians don't really get a push or get policy change, that we're going to fall into something like that, or do you think we're just going to fall into like another civil war or something?
I think we're in, I think the government's trying their hardest to cause a civil war. Yes, and you're absolutely correct that there's this great divide that they're trying to do with vaccinated, unvaccinated, and different classes. Workers versus educators, and the other thing that they like to do is corporations versus the workers too. The big thing is, I mean, you can push to the moon as far as salary and stuff. We really shouldn't have a minimum wage. I'm kind of turning the corner on this a little bit because, they push for 15. The Democrats are big on push for 15. And now we have an inflation rate that is outrageous. And 15 doesn't even do anything anymore. So now they're going for 30. Okay, so the average Joe that wants to get a loaf of bread is now going to have to pay $6, $7, $8 for a loaf of bread so small business can thrive. Again, you're just feeding into the corporations that much more. Yeah, they can suck that a little bit, but your mom and pop grocery store is not going to be able to do that.
No.
And it's so counterproductive. They think they're doing the great deed, the good for the good of humanity. Everybody should be making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, with those hundreds of thousands of dollars, the prices get pushed higher and higher and higher. And that's why I think that another depression is going to be happening because you're going to have to control prices at some point.
Yep.
And the only way that I think we're so far into it now that there's no way to get out of this national debt crisis, that you are going to have a depression of some sort that the government doesn't bail out and try to push down the road. The problem is right now we're on the borrowed dollar, I would say, because the world currency right now is the U.S. dollar. Well, you're starting to see a lot more of these countries say, "Hey, we want to get off the U.S. dollar as the world currency." You know what that does? That would absolutely cripple the United States of America. Absolutely cripple. And it's not brought up enough. I think that's one big thing. It's not brought up enough. And you can see, like Saudi Arabia was looking at going with the UN for the oil currency. Well, the US dollar is the major currency for the oil industry. So if you get the UN, I mean, China already has us pretty much, and they become the world currency. That's it. It's the end of the United States as we know it. And it's unfortunate that we're not, looking at that and saying, hey, we need to get things under control from a federal standpoint. I think a lot of the states do a pretty good job. I'm not gonna knock Wisconsin. I'm not gonna knock some other states that are actually kind of budget neutral. But I will knock like California,
Mm-hmm.
New York State. But again, these are things that Wisconsin was able to control some of this. And I think with Walker's administration, he actually did a decent job of setting back regulations for this state in order for small businesses to thrive. Unfortunately, a lot of that stuff got reversed when Evers went in. But he also had faults too. Walker had faults too. I mean, the Foxconn debacle. I mean, giving taxpayer money to big corporations is always never a good thing to have them settle here. What you need to do is get rid of the state income tax. I think that's a big thing right now. That's my biggest push right now. You get rid of state income tax. And I don't like raising taxes, but even if you raise the sales tax for the state 0.5%, you are, first off, that's cost neutral. And second off, you won't have the over abundance of money that they've had with the state income tax. They've been having surpluses for years now. The big thing I see, though, you look at Texas, you look at Florida, you look at Tennessee, their sales taxes would still be much higher than Wisconsin's, and you would have people flocking into Wisconsin to want to start a small business because most of your state income taxes are coming out of small businesses. So if you're infusing the small business and attitude on top of the retirees would not want to leave the state anymore because they're not paying state income tax, Wisconsin would be a thriving state. I mean, you would be seeing, Florida, Arizona, Texas looking at cutting their state sales taxes to try and compete with us, and which I think would be great. I think that when states offer competition among states, I think that's where innovation, one, and the population will root out and want to go to. I think that's a big problem with Wisconsin has always been. It's been a heavily taxed state. And that's why people look at after retirement. Well, one, the weather's, pretty crummy, though not this past year. But and two, that they're just, why should my IRA or my 401k get taxed to hell by the state when I can go to Texas and just pull it out all for free?
Right. I think we have a good thing in Wisconsin that we have a lot of camaraderie as far as communities will take care of themselves. And if you look at smaller communities in the state, and I mean, there's a lot of open spaces in Wisconsin. There's a lot of space that you can cover. When you're talking about municipalities like Green Bay, that's a small city. If you look at Milwaukee, is relatively small as well. I mean, and if you look at Madison is just a very, very tiny, densely populated center, and then everything else is spread out. So, I mean, Wisconsin has the ability to still have area and room, and people do take care of each other. I mean, I don't think we need to tax the hell out of each other to give incentive to people that are not participating. I think that if we were to actually put the money back into the hands of the people that are actually producing, reduce regulations, get the government out of the way, you will have people that will just continue to do what they do, and that is to produce for their community. And it just depends on the demand of what they need. You know, you do have people that take advantage of stuff like that, but I mean, I think if we were to look at the legislation and start reducing instead of trying to, always trying to counteract something, or like you said, Walker introduces bills and gets stuff done, and then it's all repealed by the next governor, and we just have this back and forth BS. When we start really just cutting the laws out of our way, I think that we'll be in a better place for our future. What do you think about Wisconsin being a state to be a high producer of hemp and cannabis, and to have those industries in? I mean, and they're, Wisconsin's pretty good at producing diesel technicians, and a lot of skilled trades like welders and miners, and a lot of skilled trades come out of Wisconsin and are recruited to other states like Colorado, California, Alaska, to because we understand the climate changes, we can deal with the cold for the most part, and people are hardworking individuals in the state. What do you think would be best for people if they were to move forward, and how would you influence that as Secretary of State?
Well, as Secretary of State, they really don't have any power anymore as far as getting those types of things off the ground. They used to do a lot of stuff with small businesses and things like that, but that power's pretty much been stricken from the Secretary of State. But I think that if you allow cannabis to be legalized and hemp be used, first off, you're going to have a lot more land usage. I mean, we have a lot of land that's not being used because farmers are cutting what they're producing just based on, one, the federal government will only allow them to produce so much.
To control pricing.
And control pricing, yeah. And two, there are lands that would grow better, say marijuana, the plant marijuana would grow better in certain sections of these farms. And I think that to waste the land that people have, and they're paying taxes on that land still, even if they're not using it, I think that's counterproductive. And if we go forward with legislation that legalizes marijuana, I think that, well, one, you expunge the criminal records of these people that have been prosecuted.
Nonviolent criminals.
And then nonviolent criminals that did nothing but did something that was their choice. They weren't pushing on somebody else per se. So, I mean, I'm going to go into something that's a little bit different. At least with that, our jails, you're going to have less people in jail. So you're going to have less of a population and less of a burden for corrections officers and those types of things. Plus all the benefits that come with the legalization of a substance that's a plant that can be used for other things like textiles.
Yep.
And actually it's probably more of a planet saver too, because then you'd be getting out of the palm oil business, which I just read an article that Indonesia is now not going to be producing certain oils out of their country, which is going to
makes you more self-reliant, right, Neil? It makes you more self-reliant, that your community can provide something that has so many uses, from timber supplementation to fiber supplementation to clothing, hemp seed as a nutrition source. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of uses for these plants. And to convert, let's say, paper mills over to a hemp processing plant, you're not talking a very major expense. So, I mean, I'm going to let you continue, because I think hemp should definitely be legal in this state for everybody to grow. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be regulated as heavily as it is right now in the state. If you were to look in the regulation, it's ridiculous.
Well, and you're talking about planet saving too, right? Because you're not cutting down as many trees.
Yep.
So you're putting more oxygen into the atmosphere. It's so funny because, to me, again, I'm going to go back to COVID, but it's kind of dumb. But these planet savers that are pro planet, and yet they'll allow the mask mandate to go through and have all these masks laying around all over the neighborhoods and stuff like that, get in the oceans and those types of things, and they don't speak a word. You don't hear anything regarding that. But I'm gonna go back to marijuana and cannabis and hemp. I think it should be legalized. I'm 100% for legalization. I also think it needs to be regulated a little bit, but not overregulated, because once you overregulate it, like in California, where nobody can make a nickel, or Colorado, where it's also heavily regulated, you're not allowing for innovation into things that it could be useful for. What the California farmers are actually doing is now they're kind of, hiding it and going and giving it away to other states. I mean, they're going to Nevada, they're going to Arizona, they're going to Oregon, and they're seeing a big influx of it. But again, if you're a farmer and you have to start off with $1 million just to get a permit, and then you have to follow that plant from seed to purchase, all that regulation is just cause you make no money.
Yep.
And who wants to be in a business that you're not going to make any money? And again, it's corporate greed too, because what ends up happening is these small town farmers that try to produce this plant have now been taken over by corporations, and these corporations are now running these plants and
yep, super growers.
Yeah,
it's just like super dairy farms.
Oh yeah,
and all this other stuff. I mean, once you take it out of the hands of the local producer and make it into a mass production system, I mean, all you have is fraud, waste, abuse. You have, and I was going to get back to I call them the do-gooders. These are the people that are walking around with plastic bottles saying, "I love the earth." Yeah, it's complete nonsense. I mean, practice what you preach. Have the skill sets to actually perform what you want in life. That's another thing that I talk about in this show, is having the skills to be able to produce for yourself, to where you're not relying on a fiat currency. You have the knowledge and skill sets and the wisdom, because you're going to fail sometimes. And that's another issue that people have, is that, "I can never fail." Well, I'm sorry, but that's just life, people. I think that Wisconsin has a very good baseline to branch libertarians all over the country. I think that with our land assets that we have, with the way people are with each other in the community. Now, I'm not saying that people can get into it with each other, but for the majority, people can respect each other enough to let them live their own lives and stay out of everybody else's business. For the most part, people are hardworking. People will get up and go to work in negative 20, 30-degree temperatures. If that's what they need to do, they will get up and go do that job. So there are people out there that want freedom. I think that we have the ability to spread it around Wisconsin, and voting for this man over here. Oh, see, still ass backwards. It's that man over there. Will help libertarians be able to do that. So Neil Harmon is running for Secretary of State. I got a question for you, and I wanted to see what you thought about this. So far, my administration has reduced income taxes by 15% for working families, increased our state's investment in public education, repaired over 1,700 miles of road and nearly 1,300 bridges, increased mental health support through the Get Kids Ahead program. We have a lot more work to do. We're going to keep doing the right thing for Wisconsin. What do you think about that post from Tony Evers?
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, a load of BS.
Yeah, I cut 15% in taxes. Okay, well, I raised it 15% before I cut it 15%. All those road projects and bridges were already, I think they were already being in the works. So I don't think you can take credit for something that was already implemented. What else was part of that? Oh, the mental health thing. Well, that's definitely something we need to invest more in. I don't disagree with that statement whatsoever. I don't think it's being invested wisely. I still think that a lot of nonprofits can do better with the money that the state is rolling into that. And I think that they're giving it way too much government control. But yeah,
mental health, I have one thing to say about mental health. One thing is, mental health is about being able to do for oneself, not having government in your way, and being able to get out there and live your life how you like. As a mental health patient, once I got out of all that craziness, life felt a whole hell of a lot better. I'll tell you that much. Live to succeed, not to not to chase what everybody else wants you to do. I'll say that.
Yeah, and I think like I said, I think the nonprofits do a lot better. I think sometimes they run too much to I need medication, I need medication, I need medication. Well, there's other therapies that are out there that may work better for some people. And I think sometimes we become too dependent on the pills. And again, that's education too. And I think the nonprofits would do a better job than what our governments do. And it truly is, it is one of our greatest challenges going forward, because I even think that the drug epidemic is not an epidemic. It's a mental health problem that we have. It's not a drug problem. And I think that a lot of doctors too need to see, look at these counter therapies and see what is best for the patient, instead of pushing the newest, most expensive thing out there because they're getting a little kickback on the side.
I
Which is
love the freest thing in the world is to get up and move. Get your body moving.
And some things work like that. I have a friend that started veterans, that was part of a veterans group that started getting gym memberships for veterans that were maybe have suicidal thoughts or PSTD or PTSD. Yeah. And very successful at it. And sometimes that works for people. If you take your mind off what your supposed problem is and focus your energy onto something else, sometimes that it does work. And I'm not saying that pills don't work. I mean, I think that some people it does and some people it doesn't. My problem with pills is that sometimes it can be a mask for something that it may be even more serious that's going on that you're not catching, or you become dependent on those pills. And I think that's not the way to go either. I mean, I'll put personal story into it. A few years ago, I did go and I had what I thought was depression, but I actually went to my doctor and he was like, no, it's more, I think it's anxiety. I'm going to put you on an antidepressant for a short time and see how that works. And within 2-3 months, I was off. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know if it was the pills or just my mindset changed, or, maybe I thought it was getting better. But I commend my doctor, and he realized that, okay, you don't need it anymore. I'm taking you off it, and never had to go back on. So it was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've been on every mental health pill there is, from lithium to Depakote to Effexor XR to all that shit. And now I don't take any of it. I gained like 50, 60 pounds, became borderline diabetic, being on all the medication. It was literally killing me. And what I found out is that I needed to change my surroundings, get out of the rat race of the city, and slow things down a little bit, but then get back to my physicality as far as being physically fit and releasing those nice chemicals in my brain as I'm going for a jog or a run, or if I started going to a boxing club and started sparring and doing stuff like that. And I mean, it's amazing what you can do just by being physically active and not sitting on the couch. That's one thing David Goggins says is get off the damn couch. You can't accomplish shit from sitting on the couch. So get up and get something done. And I love David Goggins for that. Navy chief, Navy SEAL. I mean, just a badass person. So if you want to follow anybody, follow that individual. But yet again, he doesn't appeal to everybody because he swears and he doesn't make everything nicey nice like everybody likes nowadays. But yet again, life isn't nicey nice to you all the time, as we see here. So
yeah, just walk around downtown, you'll hear plenty of explicit language.
Yeah, I'm not
Milwaukee, I'm saying. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I got out of the VA, I participated in Dry Hooch, which is a vets organization, and they were an independent versus the going to the VA as well.
Well, and what Jacob Vandenplas is doing with his farm too. I think that's a good escape too. And that he's doing a good job with veterans as far as getting them involved in farming. And again, that takes your mind off of what you perceive as your worldly problems, and it focuses it onto something that is helpful for both you and other people.
And you can see the results, literally.
And I think a big problem is people are very selfish and they look out for themselves too much. And I think that volunteerism is a big thing. I think that people should, do a few hours a week or whatever and help out in some capacity, whether be pick up garbage on one weekend in a month or something like that. I think it's rewarding that you're doing something for the community and no charge to the community, and you're also getting yourself out there. You're walking around, you're physically active, and that's very important. I mean, with me, I think the Libertarian Party saved me a lot because I'm out and about all the time. My wife's probably upset with me half the time because I'm never home, but it's just the way it is. And she understands it. She's an introvert. I'm an extrovert, so I love talking. So that I never have a problem having a conversation with anybody. And that's my big thing is if we communicate and we're out seeking answers to the questions instead of sitting, like you said, sitting on the couch. I don't like to sit on the couch. I don't like being in the house more than 4 hours a day. So um and that's a big thing. I don't like I cannot stand being in my house. If
Because
I'm in
you're
my house, I want to be
enclosed, it's like
outside.
claustrophobic. You
Yeah,
want to be
and that's what
free.
the walls are coming in on me, and then
Yep.
I gotta be out of there.
Well, I hope you're out on the campaign trail. How you doing on your signatures? I saw a post on your Facebook page that you're 10 days in officially today, right? It was on the 15th. You guys
15th, yep.
started. How
We're
you
10
doing?
days in. I really don't have hardcore numbers right now because I have a lot of people helping me out, which I'm very, very appreciative for. I hit the farmers market in Madison a couple of weeks, 2 weeks in a row. Very, very busy. The first weekend was really cold, so people didn't really want to stop just because they had the coffees in their hands and stuff like that. And the second week, I didn't have really much success either. I did have a couple other people working at the same time too. I don't know what they collected, but I really had low numbers for what I personally wanted. I actually had better numbers sitting in a bar this past weekend than being out there in Madison. But I think we're on task. I think we're right where we want to be. Maybe a little bit behind, not quite sure yet. I got to reach out to a few people. I know there's a couple mega collectors out there that are helping me out. So with the convention, that should be a little bit of a bump. I got several things coming up in May too. I have a river cleanup that I'm going to be doing on top of I'm going to be up in Door County helping out Jake on the 14th, and then the week after that we're going to have some big event down in Milwaukee to get signature collections too that we're working on also. And the problem for me is I'm going to be going to the national convention the last week of signature collection, so I want to make sure I get all this done before I leave, so my wife can take it to Madison on that Friday before and turn them in, because I mean the goal is 2,000, but really the goal is 2,500 or 3,000 because there are going to be some names that are stricken from it. But as of right now, I think we're on a good pace. I think we're right where I need to be. But again, I don't really have the hardcore numbers yet. I really haven't been diving into who's been collecting what, but I've had some surprises of some people that I didn't even think were collecting for me, and they are. And they'd say, "Oh, I already have 50, 60 of them for you." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that's more than I was expecting. I wasn't even expecting you to collect for me, and you have 50, 60. It's great. That's going to boost my number of what I personally have to get." And I think that's the hard thing is you're trying to be on the campaign trail at the same time, and you're trying to get signature collections too, and it is kind of a waste for your campaign to be doing it individually yourself, but it's also necessary to get out there, and then you're showing that you care about getting your own signatures too. So I definitely am out and about. Hitting up a lot of my friends too, and over the next week here, I have a big bunch of friends that still haven't signed yet, so I'm hoping that I can kind of climb closer to the goal. But I'll
Okay.
have more of a gauge by the beginning of the month. I want to get a initial collection, so I'll have actual raw total that I can put out there. We're 40% to our goal. We're 60% to our goal, or whatever. Because I think people need to see that too. Because then we can scramble. If we need to scramble, then we can scramble. If we need to put more resources into it, we can do that too. I'm pretty much self-funded anyway. I have a donation page set up, but again, I think that it's more I don't like taking outside money. I'm a big believer that I should be self-reliant on running for this. I don't want to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't mind spending a couple $1,000s for myself. I'm gonna have resources at my disposal that I think that are important, but I also don't think I should be spending $100,000 or $200,000 and wasting people's money for a job that I get paid $75,000 a year. I think that's completely unfair that people are spending, like the 8th congressional district. That gentleman the Republican incumbent has over $2 million in his pocket from outside sources, and I think that's completely unfair. One, and two, why are you spending that much on a job that you're not even getting paid that much? I know that people use government as a stepping stone to get into private business, and that's where they really make their money. Unless you're in Congress, and then you do insider trading, which is totally illegal for the normal citizen, but for them it's okay to do because they're doing a service for the country. Well, I think your service for the country is for the people, not to line your pocketbook. So, and I'm a firm believer in that. I will never, ever, ever take money, especially outside the state. I'll take money from inside the state if people are willing to give me money. I'm 100% putting whatever I get right back into the campaign for yard signs, literature, those types of things. I'm not keeping anything off to the side for anything else other than putting it right back into my campaign. And like I said, most of the money is going to be my own money. So if people want to donate, I'm perfectly fine with that. But I know one thing, that 100% of it is going right back into the campaign, and I'm not. There's going to be no dime left except for what's going to be in the campaign.
Well, that's excellent because that shows your integrity. And I would just encourage anybody that has their $1,000 iPhone or anything like that. That is probably the biggest asset that you could have because you can shoot whatever you want as far as photos of you on the campaign trail, going out knocking doors, and it could just be two people, one documenting it, one and yourself getting the signatures and everything. And I mean, there is so much you can do without having to spend outside money. And I know gas is around, like $4 or $5 a gallon for premium, but shit. I mean, you can travel around this state on probably two full tanks of gas and probably get a lot of stuff accomplished. So people don't understand that it's not all about being on TV and everything. It's a hell of a lot easier to talk to somebody when they're standing right in front of you than it is to get on a phone or on a Zoom call or anything like that and wait your turn. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on the Lunatic Libertarian. We're running over an hour, and I'm new to YouTube, so I don't want to piss off the YouTube guys by taking all their time. Um, let the people know where they can find you as far as you're at neilanthonyharmon@gmail.com.
Yep, you
The
can email me
Facebook link.
directly. And my Facebook page, Harmon for Secretary of State. And I respond. I'm the only one that responds, so you won't get some automated message. You may get something that I'll get back to you shortly. That's just standard for Facebook. They make me put that on there, but I usually get back within no time unless I'm working, obviously. But yes, everything that comes from either my email or my Facebook page is directly from me and not some stooge that works under me or anything like that.
So Neil Harmon, a real human being, a real worker, running the Libertarian Party for Secretary of State of Wisconsin. Thank you very much, sir, for being on the show. And get out there, vote for this man. He's a real human being, and he said he'll talk to you no matter if you email or get at him on Facebook. That's a real human being that wants to do real things for the rest of the people from Wisconsin. Thank you very much, Neil. I really appreciate you. I'm Justin Lomness, the Lunatic Libertarian, and we are out. Thank you very much, sir.